Today we have a crazy story. And I'm not exaggerating on first glance, you'll think. There's no way this is true. But we've scoured newspapers around the world, and every detail is true. The thing is, the truth isn't always what you want to see. Before we get started, if you're a sucker for weird, dark, and inexplicable stories, told as if whispered to you in the dark, you've come to the right place. That's all we do, once a week. And if that sounds like you, change your like button to a bottle of banned pesticide that was recalled in 1983. Trust me, it fits the mood you're in. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because if you miss a week, the story might catch you in your dreams. No YouTube required. A chilly September evening, 1885. A crescent moon filtered through the gray clouds, illuminating the narrow, deserted dirt road. The wheels of the carriage creaked and groaned as it came to a stop. Mary stepped down, her skirts brushing the damp ground. She stood still, facing an isolated mansion in the middle of the deserted countryside. Moss-covered stone walls and black windows, like empty eye sockets watching. The wind blew through the dead trees, creating a rustling sound like a distant whisper. Mary shivered. Her hands tightened on the old suitcase, her breath white before her, fading into the night. She walked slowly toward the dark wooden door, which seemed too large for the person living inside. The door swung open before she could knock. No sound, only the shadow of the maid quietly appearing in the doorway. Without a word, without a smile, she bowed, took Mary's luggage and turned to walk into the darkness. Mary hesitated, then followed. Her heels echoed lonely in the cold, long stone corridor. The old portraits on the walls seemed to stare at her every move, their eyes cold and lifeless. Mary paused, feeling a cold draft pass through her collar, and something, a vague feeling, as if she were not alone. Mary stopped in front of the closed bedroom door, the oil lamp inside casting a faint, dying yellow light through the crack. The wind whistled softly down the long hallway, the sheer curtains at the end of the hallway swaying slightly. Though none of the windows were open, she raised her hand and knocked lightly 3 times. The knocking sounded as if it were swallowed up by the thick walls. And then a hoarse, trembling voice came out. "Come in, Mary." Mary pushed open the heavy door. Inside, the room smelled of ointments, damp cloth, and thyme. On the 4-poster bed covered with yellowed lace curtains, her aunt lay on her side, her silver hair disheveled, her pale skin stretched thin as parchment. But strangely she smiled, a gentle smile, too gentle, too unreal. "You're here," she whispered, her voice like wind passing over pebbles. They exchanged a few light words about the trip, about the cold September wind. The words were light as mist, but there was something heavy in the air, as if each sentence had to pass through the invisible ghost that was lurking in the room. Then suddenly her eyes softened. They were slightly moist, but not with emotion, but as if she were seeing something behind Mary, something Mary could not see. Her voice was a whisper, full of pity. "Really, how much have you suffered, Mary?" A simple question, but it was haunting. Mary stood still, as if the whole room had frozen. That question was not just about sadness. It brought back everything: death, torment, the shadow that had followed her since that night. And in those old eyes that looked at her was something more than pity, but knowing, a secret that could never be spoken. Late at night, the room was pitch black, with only the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting mottled shadows on the walls. Mary woke up as if she had been pulled out of the abyss. Her breathing was rapid, her chest heaving, her nightgown soaked with sweat. Her heart was pounding in her chest as if it were about to tear her bones apart. She had just escaped from a nightmare, but it had not yet let her go. She could still feel the cold, damp mist creeping through the hem of her dream dress. She could still hear the faint groaning in her head like the wind blowing through a pit, like someone groaning in pain, or being buried alive. In her dream, she stood in the middle of a vast, desolate field under the silver, deathly moonlight. Not a tree, not a blade of grass moving. There was only the ash-gray ground and a dilapidated barn rising like a great grave. The darkness around the warehouse was thick, as if it were breathing, expanding, living. A moan echoed from within, drawn out, wet, strangled. Mary, in her dream, wanted to turn and run, but her feet kept moving, as if pulled by invisible chains, as if there was a part of her longing to open that door. She couldn't remember if she had opened it, but she remembered how it felt as she approached the metallic smell, the smell of freshly dug earth, and a chill that seeped from the crack in the door so cold it felt like fingernails were running down her spine. Now even awake, she could still feel it, that smell, in the room. Mary turned her head. The darkness in the corner seemed thicker, as if it were silently contracting. Out in the hallway, the wooden floorboards creaked, as if someone had walked through them, but there was no sound of a door opening. In her dream, Mary stood frozen before the rotting wooden door of the barn. The rusted hinges groaned, as she, as if impelled by an invisible force, wrenched it open. The door swung open with a tearing sound into the night. Darkness poured out like a thick liquid. Inside, a huddled figure, kneeling in a corner, groaning softly like the gasps of a dying animal. The body was so thin that the skin clung to the bones, pale as damp paper, veins crisscrossed like spider webs. Mary took a step closer, shivering. A chill swept down her spine. Then the creature raised its head. A familiar face. No, it couldn't be. She froze. It was her husband's face, but distorted as through a cracked mirror. His eyes empty, black, hollow as smoldering coals. The eye sockets oozed black, viscous liquid down the bony cheekbones. His mouth opened not to speak, but to hiss a hoarse, cracked sound, like a whetstone on metal. Mary. She fell back, stumbling, crawling backwards in panic. Her heart pounded, threatening to burst from her chest. Then, everything was gone. Mary sprang to her feet in the darkness of the guest room. Cold sweat clung to her back. Her breath caught as if someone were strangling her. The room was so quiet she could hear the blood pounding in her ears. But there was still a faint sound, something like a moan. It was unclear whether it was from inside her head or from behind the wall. Unable to bear the stuffiness of the room, Mary got up, pulled on her coat, and with trembling hands reached for the brandy decanter on the table. Her throat burned as she poured a sip, but the warmth did nothing to dispel the chill that prickled beneath her skin. Outside, the wind scratched at the windows like the nails of a hungry man. For some reason, or what compelled her, Mary opened the back door and stepped out into the darkness. The moon hung in the sky like a cold silver eye, watching her every step. The moonlit lawn was pale, and dew lay thick on the sleeves of her robes. But Mary did not stop. Her feet led through the withered garden, past the broken fence, and up the steep slope behind the manor, a place that had not been used for years. The grass grew wild, and the smell of damp, rotting earth seemed to cling to every breath. At the foot of the hill, the world was eerily silent. No owls, no insects. There was only the pounding of her heart in her ears. and the wind howling like a long wail from another world. Mary stopped at the top. Her breath turned to smoke. The brandy bottle slipped from her hand, clattering against the rocks. At the foot of the hill, in the dark wasteland, it stood. The old barn. Just like in the dream, rotten walls, tilted roof, shadows gathering around its feet like clotted blood. There was no mistaking it. It couldn't be. But it was real. Right here. In this world. Mary wasn't sure if she was awake or still dreaming. But she knew one thing. Something was waiting inside. A trance-like fascination gripped Mary. She could no longer control her steps. They carried her silently down the hill, toward the barn, though her heart pounded like a drum, screaming warnings. The wind whistled through the meadow, carrying a familiar whine, a long, drawn-out sound, as if from the dream itself. Mary choked. Cold air seeped into her lungs. Standing before the rotten wooden door, her hands shook, her knuckles white. But then, she pushed the door open. A creaking sound, slow, heavy, as if she had broken some kind of seal. Inside, dark, stale, rotting. And then she saw it. Not her husband. Not the monster. A woman skinny and twisted on the rotten straw floor. Skin stretched like paper about to tear. Eyes sunken. Dry lips that moaned softly like the wind through cracks in the wall. Mary instinctively recoiled, her heart clenched with an unnamed fear. But then, something in her changed. The disgust gave way to a deep pity, intense and incomprehensible, as if she had known this woman before, as if she had done something wrong. Mary knelt, her hand reaching out in a trembling gesture. The woman said nothing, just opened her eyes and looked straight at her. There was no pleading, no gratitude, just something terrible, almost knowing. A quiet knowing, ancient, as if Mary had awakened something that should not have been touched. Mary took off her coat, her hands still trembling, and gently draped it over the withered body as if it were a corpse that had not yet cooled. She gently lifted the woman's head, pouring a few drops of brandy over lips as dry as rotten paper. The liquid trickled slowly through her mouth, dripping like blood. The woman stirred slightly, her eyes still wide open, staring at Mary unblinkingly. It was unclear whether it was gratitude or accusation. Mary sat down beside her, her back against the moldy wooden wall. She said nothing. Neither did the other. But something between them was locked in invisible, melancholy, unbreakable bond. Outside the warehouse, the world seemed to have stopped breathing. No roosters crowed. No wind. Not a single sliver of light to signal dawn. Just dense darkness, closing in on all sides. A part of Mary began to panic. Why wasn't it already morning? She looked back at the woman. Those eyes were still wide open, white, empty, and not blinking once. It felt like they had been sitting there for a long time. Not just one night. Maybe more. Maybe forever. As the sky was just beginning to turn pink, the sound of horses' hooves echoed as if from a great distance, discreet, vague but breaking the frozen night. A covered carriage, covered with dust and damp moss, approached silently through the gray mist. The coachman, an old man, his eyes as dull as ash, stopped when he saw Mary waving frantically. She rushed forward, her voice hoarse. "Help me, please." He asked nothing. He did not seem surprised. He simply nodded, got out, and together with Mary, lifted the woman into the carriage. The body was light, cold as stone, but still breathing. Or was it just the pulse echoing from Mary's hand? No one spoke all the way back. The wheels crunched on the damp ground, leaving deep tracks as if dragged from another world. When she reached the manor, the morning light was just enough to see the mist creeping along the corridors. Like searching fingers, Mary knocked. She shouted. Finally, the maid poked her head out, her face pale. A doctor was summoned. His eyes lingered longer than usual on the woman, but he said nothing. Mary stood still. She should have been relieved, but the cold clung to her like claws. The cloak she had once covered the woman with lay sprawled on the floor, damp with dew, smelling of dirt and something else, something unearthly. And the woman? She said nothing. She just lay there, her mouth slightly open as if smiling. But not at Mary. Mary collapsed on the bed, her teeth chattering, cold sweat soaking the mattress. The fever burned her from within, not for days but for centuries. Delirium mixed with whispers and groans echoed from somewhere in the walls. The smell of iron, of damp earth clung to her like a curse. Day after day, leaves outside the window fell like dried corpses, covering her soul in heavy layers. And then, one morning when autumn had seeped into the bones of the earth, Mary opened her eyes. The world seemed to have fallen from a nightmare. The room was strangely quiet. No birds, no wind, no servants. But she was not alone. In the corner of the room sat a woman, dark dress, hands clasped in her lap, back straight as a statue, not moving. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, looking at Mary with a gaze beyond life. No introduction needed. Mary recognized her. It was the woman. But now she was no longer gaunt, no longer dying. Her skin was flawlessly pale. Her hair was curled, sleek, a calm, gentle demeanor, as if she had always lived here. Mary wanted to say something, but her throat was dry, and no sound came out. The woman tilted her head, smiled, a smile too perfect to be real. "You're finally awake," she said, her voice low as if from a well. "I've been waiting." The woman in the corner spoke suddenly. Her voice was urgent, a whisper like wind through long locked doors. "The ship caught fire on a moonless night," she said, her eyes piercing Mary, as if recalling a memory no longer of this world. "The fire consumed everything sails, men, even the ship's name burned away. There was no one left alive, except me." A pause. Then the narrative continued, more forcefully. "A man dragged me out of the sea. I didn't see his face that night. We drifted to an island. No name, no map. He said I owed him my life. I believed." A shiver ran through her. So slight it was as if someone had just run a hand over her skin. But every day, he changed. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just whispered to the trees, and he drew symbols on the rocks, on my body. He said, they were talking to him. Mary held her breath. The room was dead silent. He said I was the key, the door. A year passed like a lifetime. Finally he built the raft, left me, with that laugh, still ringing in my ears every night. She blinked for the first time. They found me, put me in an institution in Cornwall. They thought I was crazy. Maybe I was crazy. A smile, but no warmth. I hid. I walked hundreds of miles. No food, no water. I don't remember the way. Just that sound, like the wind whining in my chest. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Until my feet led me to that barn. I thought I would die, but I didn't. A stare at Mary. Destiny waited for me and sent you. Mary sat still, not daring to breathe. unable to take his eyes off the woman who was now like a mirror, reflecting something deep, dark and unformed within herself. Suddenly footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow, heavy. The heels on the wood creaked like the house groaned. Mary turned, her heart pounding. The door opened. There he stood, James, her husband, alive, plump, dusty coat, slightly long hair, but those eyes were unmistakable, the look she had dreamed of, cried over. Mary was speechless. The woman in the corner chuckled, as if she had waited for this moment for a long time. James stepped in. Mary. He spread his arms, his smile radiant. I tried to come back. I missed you. Mary staggered to her feet, stretching her steps. They embraced. The smell of real skin, real heartbeats, real breath. But across the room, the woman sat calm, smiling, not taking her eyes off them. See? She whispered, as if to herself. You just have to endure the pain long enough, and the door will open. A few weeks later, newspapers everywhere reported the shocking news. Widow reunites with husband after nightmare. No one can explain it. People flocked to the small village, took pictures, wrote articles. Words like miracle, supernatural intuition, dream guidance. But only Mary knew. Since James returned, he had never slept. He walked around all night, eyes wide open, mumbling in a language that was not English. And sometimes in the mirror, she could not see his reflection. Here's a more haunting version of the ending one that's creepy and mysterious in true strange, dark and mysterious fashion. Thanks for sticking around. But before you go, let me know in the comments what part of today's story creeped you out the most. I really want to know, because the weirdest details are often the ones that are true. We have hundreds of other videos waiting for you to explore, each one a window into the darkness that still bears human footprints. But if you're wondering where to start here, it is the one I recommend you don't watch alone. Trust me. See you soon.